begin the 6th lecture on Hebrew. At this time, we will review the perfect and imperfect forms of Hebrew verbs that we learned in our last lecture. We will continue with the first person, the second person, and third person imperatives of the imperfect form. Let me show you the perfect form and the imperfect form here on the board. These are the ends of words of the perfect and imperfect form in Hebrew. The perfect form of Hebrew is made up of basic consonants, which do not include prefixes, endings, or suffixes. We will use these 3 blank spaces at this time. The squares show us the 3 basic consonants of Hebrew verbs. Next, the third person feminine singular of the perfect form. There is the ending a. Next, the second person masculine singular. The second person masculine singular has the ending ta. Next, the second person feminine singular. The second person feminine singular has the ending t at the root of the basic consonant. Next, the first person common singular. The first person common singular has the ending t at the root of the basic consonant. The third person masculine plural has the ending u. The third person feminine plural also has the ending u. Next, the second person masculine plural. The second person masculine plural has the ending tem at the basic root. Now the second person feminine plural. The second person feminine plural has the ending ten. Lastly, the first person common plural has the ending nu. My writing can be a little unclear, so please refer to this chart in order to understand the forms of the endings. The third person masculine singular is a basic form, and hence it does not have a prefix or a suffix. However, the perfect form of Hebrew has suffixes, but does not have prefixes. Hence, we use a blank or an empty space to show that endings have not been added to words. Now let's recite the suffixes of the perfect form of verbs of the Hebrew call stem. Let's begin with the third person masculine singular. Blank, a, ta, tu, ti, u, tem, ten, nu. Blank, a, ta, tu, ti, u, tem, ten, nu. You must memorize this. Let's briefly discuss the functions of this. The call stem is a strong verb, and we briefly went over this last time. Hebrew verbs are classified into 7 different voices and aspects: the kal stem, the nifal stem, the piel stem, the pual stem, the hifpael stem, the hifil stem, and the hofal stem. The kal, the nifal, the piel, the puel, the hifpael, the hifil, and the hofal stem. Verbs that do not have guttural or weak letters in the 3 basic consonants are classified as strong verbs. Among the verbs blank, a, ta, tu, ti, u, tem, ten, nu become endings of 3-letter verbs, and it forms the perfect form of all verbs, not just the call verbs. if we were to speak figuratively, if we were to produce large quantities of goods at a factory, we would first make a model of the product. Then, when the substance is poured into the model, a large quantity of goods would be produced in the same shape. There is something we must note here on the board. The spaces for the three consonants and the endings, according to the person, gender, and number, are like a model of a product. Any consonant that is put in the model will have a verb form of the call, the pual, and other forms as well. There are 7 forms, 7 verb forms, including the call verb, which are the nifal, piel, pual, hifpael, hifil, and hofal, and this here on the board is the call form. This here listed on the board is the call form. This here in the middle is the perfect form of the call verb. When we put 3 Hebrew consonants here, we will gain a form of the call verb, which will have changes in the person, gender, and number. In the next lecture, we will study how we would make the model of the perfect form of the nifal, piel, pual, hifpael, hifil, and hofal. Now let's review the model of the imperfect form of the call verb. The imperfect form is first the third person masculine singular. The prefix e is added to the basic consonant. Next, the third person feminine singular. The third person feminine singular too has a prefix for the basic consonant, which is T. Next, the second person masculine singular. The second person masculine singular also has a prefix, and it is the same prefix as that of the third person feminine singular T. Because the forms of the third person feminine singular and the second person masculine singular are the same, we can decide whether it is a third person feminine singular or a second person masculine singular by the context in which it appears. Next, the second person feminine singular. The second person feminine singular has both a prefix and a suffix. T is the prefix, and E is the suffix. Next, the first person common singular. The first person common singular has a prefix that is made up of aleph and e. Aleph and shegel produced the e sound. Next, the third person masculine plural. The third person masculine plural has both a prefix and a suffix. It has the prefix yi and the suffix wu. Next, the third person feminine plural. The third person feminine plural has the prefix t and the suffix na. Next, the second person masculine plural. The second person masculine plural also has a prefix and a suffix. T is the prefix and wu is the suffix. Next, the second person feminine plural. The second person feminine plural has a prefix and a suffix. T is the prefix and na is the suffix. Here we can see that the third person feminine plural and the second person feminine plural have the same forms. Therefore, in this case also, we decide whether a verb is a third person feminine plural or a third person masculine plural by the context in which it appears. And lastly, the first person common plural. The first person common plural has just a prefix. Ni is the prefix, nun and hirek. Here on the graph are the shapes so that we can easily identify them. Let's read just the prefixes and the suffixes. Let's begin with the third person masculine singular. E T T T yi. Aleph e. E T T T yi. Aleph e. Next, the plural. 이우, 티나, 티우, 티나, 니. One more time. 이우, 티나, 티우, 티나, 니. We must memorize the prefixes and suffixes of the perfect and imperfect forms. You may find other ways to memorize them at your convenience. Now let's apply the different forms to the verb malak. Before we apply them to malak, let's review the 7 forms of the imperfect verb form. The perfect form of Hebrew verbs is the kal. The name of the imperfect form of the kal form is yikto. The imperfect form of the nifal verb is yikatel. Yikatel. The imperfect form of the perfect form pl is yakatel. The imperfect form of the pual verb is yakutal. The imperfect form of the perfect form hifil is yaktil. Lastly, the imperfect form of the perfect form hofal is yoktal. We missed one, hifpael. The imperfect form of hifpael is yitkatel. Now please read along. Yiktor, yikatel, yekatel, yekutal, yitkatel, yaktil, yoktal. The kal, the nifval, the pl, the pual, the hifpael, the hyphil, and the hofal are simple and active, simple and passive, intensive and active, intensive and passive, intensive and reflexive, causative and active, and causative and passive, respectively. The cow, simple and active, the knife fall, simple and passive, the PL, intensive and active, the puao, intensive and passive, the hif pael, intensive and reflexive, the hifil, causative and active, and hofal, causative and passive. The word intensive indicates that the meaning of the simple form becomes stronger. What does the causative form indicate? This indicates that the promoter of the action causes the action of the verb as the third party. These are all perfect forms. Each of these 7 verb forms have imperfect forms as well. Their names are on the right column. Let's match the names of the perfect forms with the imperfect forms. Cow yiktor, naifal yikatel, PL yekatel, kual yekutal, hifpael yikatel, hifil yaktu, hofal yoktal. When you memorize them, be sure to memorize them in this order: cow, naifal, PL, pual, hifpael, hifil, hofal. Lastly, memorize the names of the imperfect forms in this order: yiktol, yikatel, yekatel, yekutal, yitkatel, yaktil, yoktal. There is a reason why you must memorize these names. It is because they have important purposes. Each name is a model in which the different forms of the perfect and imperfect forms are made. Let's look at an example of the cow verb. The imperfect form of the cow was iktor. Iktor is written like this. If we were to use a Hebrew verb called yiktor, we would have to know that this verb originally comes from the verb katal. Katal. The verb katal can be used in this way. This is the perfect form. When the perfect form is changed into an imperfect form, it changes to become the following. This is iktor. The perfect form of the katal verb is katal, and its imperfect form would be iktor. Iktor is the imperfect form of the kal verb. Hence, we call this iktor. If we replace the consonants kop, tet, lamed of the kal verb of the katal verb with different consonants, it can gain the iktor form. It can gain the imperfect form. If the roots of the other three consonants were put in this model, it would gain an imperfect form of the kal verb. Hence, we would write the prefix yod, e, and the three consonants in the square, and it would become o because of the vowel holem above the second consonant. And this is the model in which the imperfect form of the kal verb is made. Iktor is used to make the model. Here you can see the vowel e that is pronounced ye. This is written here. Next, o is written with the Hebrew vowel holem. Not only that, but we can also draw up the model of the imperfect forms in the following ways. Yikatel, the imperfect form of Nifel. Yakatel, the imperfect form of Piel. Yakutel, the imperfect form of Pual. Yitkatel, the imperfect form of Hifpael. Yaktil, the imperfect form of Hifil, and Yoktal, the imperfect form of Hofal, are all models of the imperfect form. Next, let's discuss the imperfect form of Nifal. The imperfect form of 나이팔 is 이카텔. With it, we can make this model. We made this from the verb 카텔. The perfect form of 카텔. If we make this into an imperfect form, it would become the 나이팔, and if we were to make this into a perfect form, we would bring the vowels from the 나이팔. We would bring the E and A sounds from the vowels. The prefix nun and E would be put together. Then it would produce the A sound because of 파타. Then it would become 닉탈. 닉탈 would become the 나이팔 form of 카탈. It is, of course, in the perfect form. Now, if we were to make the imperfect form of the 나이팔 verb, we would use 이카텔, the name of the imperfect form of the 나이팔, to make the model we would use. Let's first write the three consonants 콥, tet, lamed. This is 이. These are yod and hirek. Next, a. Next, e. E is chereh. Hence, it would be 이카텔. On the contrary, we would again use this model that comes from 이카텔. If we were to write consonants of the verb malak, which means rule, in the model, it would become imalek. This would be the 나이팔 imperfect form of the verb malak. In the same way, we can make perfect forms of the 나이팔, the piel, the puel, the hifpael, the hifil, and the hofel form of the cow verb. For the imperfect form, we can also put the three consonants into the model to form different forms. The names of the imperfect forms of Hebrew verbs come from the imperfect form of the verb katel. In our next lecture, we will study how perfect forms come from imperfect forms. Now let's hold off on Hebrew verbs for a moment and study nouns. In our last lecture, we briefly mentioned Hebrew nouns. We spoke of the absolute state and the construct state of Hebrew nouns. There is the absolute state and the construct state. The gender of nouns is either masculine or feminine. The number of nouns is singular, plural, or dual. Each form has an ending of a word. First, the masculine, singular, absolute state. Hebrew nouns are made up of 3 consonants. Basically, the vowel a is added to nouns. The basic form is the masculine singular absolute state of Hebrew nouns. When different endings are added, the form changes to a feminine, a plural, or a construct state. First, the feminine singular absolute state. The ending a is added to the noun. Kametz, a, and he. Then the masculine plural absolute state. E is added to the word. The endings hirek, yod, and mem. We can see them here. Next, the feminine plural absolute state. It is ot, which becomes holem vav and tau. Then there's the dual. The dual absolute state. This is marked with the ending a, im. I did not go over it last time, but there is also the construct state. All forms of the absolute state have the construct state. The masculine singular construct state is the same as the masculine singular absolute state. There are no endings added to them. There is also the masculine plural absolute state. The masculine plural construct state is 에, which is made up of chere and yod. Next, the feminine singular construct state. The feminine singular construct state is at, which is made up of pata and tau. Next, the feminine plural construct form. This is ot, which is made up of holem vav and tau, and it is the same as the absolute state. Lastly, for the dual, the masculine is 이, and the dual feminine is T. Please review these different forms. And with this, we will conclude the 6th lecture on Hebrews. Thank you.